until the end, and we'll use the last 30 minutes for your questions and answers. Before I begin my formal remarks, I want to thank AFCEA leadership for making this opportunity possible today. Lieutenant General Shea, Lieutenant General Wood, and Mr. Mike Warlick and the entire AFCEA team have done an incredible job with this event. I also want to take a minute to thank all the industry and academia partners, along with all the former and current military and civilian teammates from across DoD that make this week very special in Augusta. So now what are we all here for? Information advantage. Go next slide. So information advantage is a result of over a year of hard work and subsequent guidance from the Army senior leaders. This new approach for commanders and their staffs to employ all military capability for relative advantage over our adversaries is continually adapting and growing as we learn more and leverage our imagination and experience in this critical area of emerging military art and science. This approach has coalesced a diverse group of multidisciplinary experts from across the Army to form an incredible community of interest, with the goal of creating and maintaining information advantage for Army and Joint Force commanders. Following our formal session this morning, several experts in the Info Advantage community of interest will be available to further discuss this topic, and I'll ask them to raise their hands at the end so you know how to find them. I'm framing my comments this morning with a short topic overview and 3 focal areas of what we've done, what we're doing, and what we're going to do. This third area is where we're looking to you all as part of our extended team to realize success and win as we learn, experiment, and employ all military capabilities to create and maintain information advantage for our Army. The Army's information advantage approach, as I'm describing it today, is based on the outcomes of the Information Advantage Forum that was co-hosted by the Commanding Generals of the Combined Arms Center and the Cyber Center of Excellence, and it was attended by senior leadership from across the Army. The event was held at Fort Leavenworth on the 10th and 11th this past February. The Information Advantage approach provides a conceptual framework for the Army to achieve decision dominance in multi-domain operations by creating and maintaining information advantage, currently defined by the Army senior leaders as a condition when a force holds the initiative in terms of relevant actor behavior, situational understanding, and decision-making through the use of all military capabilities. In an operational environment, or what we call the OE, characterized by continuous competition amongst nation states and lesser opponents, relevant actors seek to normalize the employment of information as a weapon to counter the United States' impressive military power. Adversaries skillfully attack the U.S. and its allies with combinations of disinformation, misinformation, and physical action in ways ill-suited for typical military responses. In this age of information, adversaries recognize the ability to influence target audience emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, producing a competitive advantage for them. They quickly leverage information to challenge advantages once believed certain by the U.S. and exploit our weaknesses, and especially in a competition. With its low cost of entry and speed of dissemination, adversaries advance anti-Western views and spread false narratives to create division between the U.S. and its unified action partners. This in turn jeopardizes the freedom of movement of U.S. forces across key areas of interest. Once adversaries achieve strategic and operational objectives, often below the threshold of armed conflict, they use information to legitimize and consolidate gains while projecting an image of sustained military strength. It is often difficult for strategic narratives to maintain pace with the rapidly changing facts on the ground. As a result, audiences and even decision makers can become confused, hesitant, fearful, and slow to act in their best interests. In order for the Army to enable a joint response to adversary actions in this space, it's critical that commanders account for the human nature of war and the information that permeates every aspect of the OE. To address the challenges before our commanders, they must be able to analyze the domains and respective dimensions that comprise the OE in order to understand the combination of conditions and variables that impact decision-making and affect the employment of the capabilities. Critical to success, understanding of the OE continually drives mission analysis and the operations processes for planning, preparation, execution, assessment of the multi-domain operations. This means that gaining, and even more importantly, creating and maintaining a position of relative advantage over rival decision makers during competition, crisis, and conflict largely depend on a commander's ability to realize information advantage. Information enables friendly, neutral, and adversary actors at all levels to achieve decision dominance by sensing, understanding, deciding, acting, and assessing faster and more effectively than others. Victory in competition or conflict may now come down to trust. Trust in data, trust in individuals and groups, trust in leaders, in doctrine, in equipment, and trust in capabilities and purpose. Increased trust speeds decision-making and assists commanders to create the necessary overmatch in scope and scale of an adversary. So what have we done to learn and then pursue this effort? The Information Advantage Logic Map represented on this slide is one of the primary products approved by the Army Lieutenant Generals who participated in the CAC CCOE Information Advantage Forum, and is represented by more than a year's worth of work by both the Combined Arms Center and the Cyber Center of Excellence. And it also included the members of the other centers of excellence across the Army. So this map that you see represents the basis of information advantage. So a brief history to set the stage for information advantage that represents the underpinning of our current efforts. On 18th of September of 2019, the Army Futures Concept Center published an op order directing the Cyber Center of Excellence Capabilities Development and Integration Directorate to complete an Operations in the Information Environment Force Modernization Assessment for the purpose of identifying required capabilities, developing recommended doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership, education, personnel, facilities, and policy, which we all know as .PMLFP solutions, to mitigate operations in the information environment gaps. Critical to the assessment was the Army's OIE white paper that was for the 2023 to 2027 cycle, which described how the Army must posture itself to effectively conduct OIE in support of MDO by 2028. The study team took into consideration information and operational requirements for the theater, Army, and below. The study team then conducted the assessment using the methodology outlined by the Chairman of Joint Chiefs Staff Instruction, specifically tailored to inform the Total Army Analysis, or what we know as the TIA, and also the Program of Objective Memorandum, POM planning processes for FY 23 to 27. So the effort began with an extensive literature search and the formation of the study team. The second step was a functional area assessment where the study team identified and defined the tasks, conditions, and standards for operations in the information environment required capabilities, or what we must do as an Army. The third step was a functional needs assessment in which the study team assessed the ability of the current and program capabilities to accomplish the tasks identified in the previous functional area assessment. They identified key capability gaps, or what we cannot do to standards, and the final step was a functional solutions analysis in which the study team developed and assessed potential .PMLFP solution or approaches to mitigate gaps, or what the Army needs to ensure success. The functional area assessment portion of the assessment concluded on the 25th of October of 2019, about a month from the release of the FCC order, with the study team developing 84 operations in the information environment required capabilities across 11 core and 5 enabling functions. From the functional area assessment, here are a few of the study group's conclusions. 1, the value of the OIE is realized primarily during competition and the transition to armed conflict. All military activities require deliberate convergence of capabilities, techniques, and activities to create capacity, capability, and positioning in the information environment. The Army must coordinate and synchronize influence and inform activities and immediately release information to all relevant actors, including adversaries. And all echelons must conduct operations in the information environment, with the primary difference being the target audience. The study team also found through the production and delivery messages, narratives, and themes that the Army can counter adversary use of ideas and images designed to sway the U.S. and its allies. The capability to monitor, characterize, analyze, and visualize the IE and plan and integrate operations in the information environment with other joint operations are critical to the competencies of the Army. Using these findings, the functional area assessment, the study team conducted a functional needs assessment in December 2019. The study group identified operational gaps that correspond to the required capabilities and produced a prioritized capability gap list. From the analysis, it was determined that 15 failed tasks and numerous subtasks were measured or measures generated operational gaps across most of the 84 required capabilities for the Army. The CCOE Operations and the Information Environment Studies team effort concluded with a functional solutions analysis, which was published in August of 2020. This functional solutions analysis led to the conceptualization of information advantage, which was codified by the CCOE in a pre-decisional information advantage white paper dated October of 2020. So based on the functional solutions analysis and the information advantage white paper, the Army Project Office for Information Advantage, or the APOIA, was formally chartered by Major General Hersey on December of 2020, with the task to learn, discover, explore, and develop solutions for the Army based on the Info Advantage white paper. And that's the team that you see sitting up here today, these three folks. Myself and the two gentlemen on the side here is the APOIA. Our team quickly learned that the potential and the scope of information advantage within the Army is significant, and a robust community of interest, which I mentioned previously, formed, which includes 06 representation and others from Army Futures Command, TRADOC, FORCECOM, DAMO-SO, CAC, and the Centers of Excellence, and many other Army organizations. Also recognize the Army's role to support the Joint Force Commander. The community of interest includes key members of the Joint Staff and the Air Force who are working on parallel efforts on information advantage and are working on related topics and documents within their own organizations. We're actively informing and participating in their efforts as well, and this has been a team effort from the very beginning. In December, the CAC commander directed that the Forum of Information Advantage would be held on the 10th and 11th of February. The IA Forum was attended by the large majority of the lieutenant generals from across the Army, and they approved the terms used to describe information advantage. The information advantage logic map that you see on the screen, which focuses on 5 IA core tasks, and then identified OPRs and OCRs for each of the IA core tasks that you see at the bottom of the screen. The Army Lieutenant Generals approved the IA white paper with associated logic map, which are all the results from the Leavenworth Information Advantage Forum, and provides the foundation for what we're doing and is informing what we're going to do. So I'm going to use the Information Advantage logic map to walk through several of the key definitions and aspects of information advantage. So as we discussed the brief history of this effort, Operations and Information Advantage was the basis of our previous work. A significant shift is ongoing due to what we've learned over the past year plus. This shift is the recognition that there is only the one operational environment. We are gaining and maintaining a condition of information advantage. The Army is no longer using the phrase Operations in the Information Environment, or OIE, or the Information Environment, IE, as the interdependencies of all the variables that must be considered by commanders fully across the dimensions of the operational environment are not viewed as distinct environment for information anymore. However, the joint community is still using these phrases, and discussions are ongoing between the Army and the joint community on this topic. So in order for the Army to enable joint responses to adversary actions in this space, it's critical that the commanders account for the human nature of war and the information that permeates every aspect of the operational environment. An operational environment is composed of 3 dimensions: physical, information, and human, and the continuous simultaneous integration of activities across those dimensions leads to the decisive actions or derails critical events from occurring. The relative emphasis on different dimensions of the operational environment vary with the purpose and the context of missions being conducted. Ultimately, understanding OE continually drives mission analysis and the operations process for planning, preparation, execution, and assessment of multi-domain operations. Gaining the initiative and maintaining a position of relative advantage over defined audiences and rival decision makers during competition, crisis, and armed conflict largely depend on the commander's ability to attain an information advantage. Information enables friendly, neutral, and adversary actors at all levels to achieve decision dominance and establish superior situational awareness by sensing, understanding, deciding, acting, and assessing faster and more effectively than others. Complementary to this is the use of all military capabilities to shape relevant actor perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors. While conducting operations during competition, crisis, and armed conflict, commanders account for the physical, information, and human dimensions of the operational environment, and commanders seek to achieve a desired state of decision dominance relative to the adversaries. So a few related terms to consider as we discuss information advantage. Go to the next slide. So you see, I'm going to read these back to you, but some of the things that we've been highlighting with the work from the Combined Arms Center. You see the definition for domain. So domain and dimension are really important as we discuss this because these have adjusted over time now. And you see now that we have the physical and the information dimension, which I just highlighted. And go to the next slide. And now we're talking with the description of human dimension, which previously we kind of interchanged human and cognitive. So you'll see that is some of the definition and how we've kind of focused the attention in those areas now. So the definition of decision dominance. It's a desired state in which commanders sense, understand, decide, act, and assess faster and more effectively than their adversaries. Organizations achieve decision dominance by gaining and maintaining positions of relative advantage across the dimensions of the operational environment, including positions of relative information advantage. Now, information advantage is defined as a condition when a force holds initiative in terms of relevant active behavior, situational understanding, and decision-making through the use of all military capabilities. So as we expand our understanding of the Army's determination of the operational environment, we're no longer using the terms of information-related capabilities or information environment, as I said, despite the use by the joint community. We found that we're now able to more fully describe and leverage the use of all military capabilities in a more integrated and synchronized fashion to address an operational environment with these adjustments. Go to the next one. So commanders gain and maintain information advantage by conducting the 5 IA core tasks through the use of the employment of all military capabilities to enable decision-making, protect friendly information, inform and educate domestic audiences. And the 4th task to inform and influence international audiences. And the 5th IA core task is to conduct information warfare. A point to highlight, public affairs are caveated to ensure the continued recognition that only specific activities and or capabilities can be used within the United States in relation to U.S. citizens. The 5 IA core tasks must be integrated by the commander as they are interdependent and a significant overlap exists across these tasks. During the February Information Advantage Forum, each of the 5 IA core tasks were aligned to an Office of Primary Responsibility or OPR, and each IA task was identified OCRs aligned with each of the institutional operational organizations from across the Army. So the OPRs consisted of 3 centers of excellence: the Mission Command Center of Excellence at Fort Leavenworth, the Cyber Center of Excellence at Fort Gordon, and the Special Operations Center of Excellence at Fort Bragg. These 3 OPRs are working alongside each other in various OCRs, such as the Intelligence Center of Excellence, the Office of Chief of Public Affairs, or OCPA, Army Cyber, USASOC, the Multi-Domain Task Force Headquarters, and various DA primary staffs are just a very small sample, set of, as we further understand and develop the requirements and capabilities for the Army related to creating and maintaining this information advantage. As a quick rundown of the OPRs, the first task of enabled decision-making was aligned to the Mission Command COE. The second task was aligned to the Cyber COE. And to use this task to highlight the interdependencies of these tasks, the Intel Center of Excellence and the Mission Command Centers of Excellence are critical OCRs amongst the other OCRs due to the requirement to fully consider all aspects, not only data protection, but also decision-making and OPSEC and counterintelligence, among other considerations within that task of protect friendly information. The third task was aligned to the Mission Command COE in close coordination with OCPA, as public affairs is closely aligned to Mission Command COE responsibilities. The 4th IA core task is aligned to Special Operations Center of Excellence, and the 5th was aligned to the Cyber Center of Excellence. So you can kind of see how the responsibility is lined down. So now what are we doing? As stated, commanders conduct the 5 Information Advantage Core tasks using all available military capabilities integrated across the 6 warfighting functions: command and control, intelligence, protection, movement and maneuver, fires, and sustainment. And they are integrated and synchronized through the operations process. The effort incorporates the critical desired state of decision dominance as well as principles of convergence, speed, overmatch, and range when we describe the relative advantage to an adversary. On one side, information advantage focuses on faster and more effective decision-making, positively affecting and contributing to the friendly decision cycle, while concentrating on the creation of dilemmas to slow and complicate an adversary's decision cycle at the respective echelon. Our analysis demonstrated that from the very beginning, during competition is where gaining information advantage is critical to a commander's mission success, and this advantage is necessary to be maintained through crisis and conflict. We have this effort as an opportunity to drive change in our Army. We've considered multi-domain operations from the very beginning, and we're continuing to work with all stakeholders across the .PLFP in an effort to integrate activities. The timeline for this effort is focused on Waypoint 28 and Aimpoint 2035 discussions and planning. Also, integration of MDO and the contributing to the multi-domain task forces is also a major consideration in all of our efforts across TRADOC and Army Futures Command. So we're aggressively working to incorporate information advantage into exercise, demonstrations, and prototyping that is already being planned and being executed. We're focused on the building of information advantage at this point to identify and build appropriate capabilities based on the gaps identified in the early analysis. So the CCOE and other COEs are working hard to have several proposals and products on the table and they're at various stages of the Army processes. As we learn through TRADOC's campaign plan lines of effort and Army Futures Command campaign of learning, we'll begin to more aggressively tie into the Army's existing processes for resourcing and execution in order to expand the Army's information advantage. One significant step is the pending HQDA XOR that's currently in staffing and in the approval process and is planned to be released in September to formalize this approach across the Army. All of our efforts are informing the parallel efforts that are within the joint community. We have briefly covered what we've done and what we're doing, and now for what we're going to do. This is where I really want to hear the ideas and experience found among the industry and academia partners. As a former SecDef said, we don't know what we don't know. We've conducted big data TTX, we've taken a look at what we know, and the dependencies on data to create and maintain information advantage, and it is critical to any success. The challenges of relevant information that is timely and accurate is more important than ever as we face the challengers that are improving their capabilities. We need solutions to win. So in mid-May, our Cyber Battle Lab took a first step to look at the anticipated data available to a core and MDTF commander during competition and determine opportunities for the application of big data platforms, how these platforms may support information advantage for a commander. As we scope this TTX, we discover there's a tremendous gap in our knowledge in relation to data, and that we have a lot more work to do following this TTX. Due to the scope and potential impact of the Army and the Joint Force Commanders, the challenge cross-cuts all of the information advantage core tasks. So another key item is the theater information advantage element that is undergoing the approval process and is on schedule to be submitted later this year to start addressing identified capability gaps and to provide capability to commanders to gain and maintain advantage. All this learning and effort will be codified in ADP 313 scheduled for publication in December of 2021, so we can build upon all of our previous activities. This means that there's opportunity to develop capability for the various IA core tasks and associated requirements, in particular to support the theater information advantage element and other related emerging requirements such as the capability and expertise to address misinformation and disinformation both locally and theater-wide. So in conclusion, information advantage currently provides a conceptual framework for the Army to achieve decision dominance in multi-domain operations by creating and maintaining information advantage, as defined by Army senior leaders as a condition when a force holds the initiative in terms of relevant actor behavior, situational understanding, and decision-making through the use of all military capabilities. Our adversaries are working with determination and purpose to undermine our strengths and exploit our weaknesses. Creating and maintaining information advantage sets the conditions to win in the information age. Lastly, I need to take a minute to recognize several of our teammates that are here this morning. Because quite honestly, they're all here because they want to meet all of you, right? And they're really looking again to have this conversation with y'all and see where we can expand our efforts and accelerate this thing. So from the community of interest, you all want to raise your hand? Pat, I'm going to single you out because you're looking hesitant. Chuck? You guys want to introduce yourself to the group?
My name's Chuck Schrankel. I'm from the Combined Arms Doctrine Director at Fort Leavenworth. I'm the Commander of the 12 Division Chief, and I'm leading the writing team for ADP 315 information, which is safe weapons, which is going to operationalize a lot of these ideas in the October-November 2022 timeframe, not just 21. Cool.
You guys take too long. It's faster, more effectively faster.
It'll probably still publish before the fact, but that's okay.
Okay, I stand corrected. Brian?
Brian Pickle, I'm the Army Public Affairs Center Director, so I fall under the Chief of Public Affairs. I'm a field operating agency. I'm working on Task 3, specifically working on countermeasures and disinformation.
So did I miss anybody? You want? Brian, are you here? You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brian Sparling. I work as a Special Advisor to General Authority at Army Cyber Command, and specifically I'm trying to figure out information warfare and the larger concepts, so happy to meet all of you.
And we also have the CCOE doctrine section here too. Do you want to introduce yourself? And then Aaron too.
And Colonel John Miller, I'm a doctor here, that's my team. As you guys heard what General Stat said this morning, I think we just played a bit of doctrine bingo this morning. So, as you know, IA is extremely important, and that's what we're kind of pushing is how we're going to be ready to start writing the new doctrine for
And then Aaron, if you want to introduce, you've been from the very beginning, so.
Aaron Pierce, I was one of the authors of the original I'm the Cyber Center of Excellence Deputy Chief Production, working on the information warfare.
Joe, I'm going to highlight you too, so if you want to introduce yourself, you're in the middle of I know you're sending a text with the recording right now.
Yes, I'm thinking of my boss. Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Joe Hammond. I'm the Crypt D Chief, so at the Mission Command Center of Excellence for the highway proponents for information operations. It's still a term. We're just not doing it, but there's still people that do the information advantage activities. That's kind of the way we're going. And then we're also the military deception proponent and the operations security proponent. And my replacement is sitting right next to me, Lieutenant Colonel Tamisha Norris, who's reading it stuff as fast as she can to get caught up. But we're all out at the Mission Command Center of Excellence at Fort Leavenworth.
Matt, do you want to introduce yourself? Costa.
Yeah, Matt Coster, I'm the Chief of Concepts at the Cyber Center. Been doing this job for a couple of years. We just delivered our cyberspace and electronic warfare concept, and what it does within it, it does introduce some of the information advantage themes. We think the next iteration we'll start working on with some little bit of direction this year. We'll start working on first the information type concept for you.
And next week.
With me, I got Mark Fisher. He's my concepts deputy. Does a lot of that work too. So see him around. He's good there.
And then Matt's tied us into the Future Studies program too for Army Futures Command that we're participating in next week, which is a iterative kind of activity that we do over time. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you this morning for your attention. A reminder that Lieutenant General Fogarty has a session tomorrow from 9 to 10, so I highly recommend that. As my former boss, but he's a dynamic speaker, as many of you know. So that concludes the formal portion of my presentation this morning. So I really want to open the floor now to questions and answers from you. No, I'm good. I don't need any applause from anyone. Thanks, though. I appreciate where your mind's at.
I'll start off.
Okay.
Mark Fisher, as far as the results of the .mil-PF assessment, usually you would take that in the JSIDS process and start working towards an ICD. Got any comment on that work over?
So that work's going on right now. So our RID section is working the ICD as we speak. So that we expect to have that out here very shortly.
So if you had said this, I apologize, coming in a little late, Mike. What is the name of the documentation for the information advantage? Is it going to be FM what? If I'm asking the right name, or are you guys ready to say that yet?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's going to be two, sir. First, we're publishing a new Army Doctrine publication, ADP 313, titled Information, and that should go out October, November next year. Probably 6 months to a year after that will be FM 313. And the new title for FM 313, I believe, is going to be Information Advantage. What I think is still up in the air is whether Cyber COE is going to write that or whether the IO folks are going to, proponents of the office going to write it.
Hey Chuck, do you want to cover the chapters that are currently in that ADP that you guys are working on?
Yeah, the ADP is organized along the tasks, okay? I mean, there's an introductory kind of chapter that talks about the fundamentals. And then we have a writing team of probably 29 people from all the various COEs. You know, my shop has written one on enabling decision-making. The Cyber COE wrote the protection chapter. Public Affairs and FMPC up at CAD has written the influence. SOCO's writing, or I'm sorry, the inform. SOCO's writing the influence, and then Aaron here is authoring the information warfare chapter. And we are about 2/3 of the way through, where we've written a product, murder boarded it, and sent it back for revision, and hope to have a complete draft by about the end of October.
So what's interesting about this, and again, I've been operational most of my career, is that doctrine is capturing kind of what we're doing now and what we see in the near term. You have Army Futures Command, and what the future studies programs are is looking in the future. So a lot of this is structured as how do you capture, because the COEs are running it, how do you capture the future capabilities and training requirements that are out there to make this more effective for the Army, right, and faster, quite honestly. So that's again why I want to make sure I have a discussion with the industry and academia out there, because you all can help us figure this out. Because again, we don't know what we don't know, as I said, so. Okay, but, and then we'll bring it back into doctrine as we kind of prototype this thing and exercise it a little bit. But right now we're still trying to really figure out where we can find the advantage to our adversaries. So any other questions? Go ahead.
So, Matt Utley, I'm the 1st Special Forces MI Battalion Commander, so we provide support to your information warfare. So my question, two-part question, it's MOEs and MOPs related, and then it's time related. So in just simple terms, what's the criteria when we know we have the information advantage over the yarding it to somebody else? So first one, how do we know when we actually get the information advantage? Second part is, how does that change over time?
So we don't know that yet. That's part of the experimentation that we have to figure out. One is getting the intelligence community involved in the effort more deliberately, quite honestly. I know that with your effort that you guys are doing at Fort Bragg with the Information Warfare Center there, and how that's tied to the mis and dis X-word that's floating around, and how we address misinformation and disinformation that's being, attacking the United States. That effort, along with the efforts of the Army Cyber and the establishment of their MI group that they're working on right now, I think that's going to accelerate our understanding of those questions. But right now, I don't know if we have those solutions, because it's really hard to define the adversary at this point in this, especially at echelon. And so as soon as we get a hold of it and we pull the thread, it evaporates a little bit on us. So we're still trying to figure out how to capture the template, if you will, of how we do that comparison analysis that we used to do. We had forces and you go for a 3-to-1 advantage and those kind of things. We just haven't been able to figure out how to quantify that. So having the work of the ORSs and just getting the experimentation is what we're looking at right now, and using the battle labs, quite honestly, to try to frame that. Does that answer your question a little bit? So we don't know yet. It's something that we're still working on. I'm hoping you guys can help us figure it out, right? So.
We're happy to help. Second part on that is time, right? So, if we have the information advantage now,
Mm-hmm.
but we're always wrong, right? Every time you lose credibility, how do you maintain that credible actor kind of stance that the U.S. always wins by? How do you maintain that over time? And are we worried about getting this tweet out faster, or are we having the right tweet later?
So that's where the trust discussion, where I just kind of touched on that really lately in there, but that's going to be critical, I think, to some of this. So a lot of it has to do with our brand. So you see a lot of the mis and disinformation efforts right now. The concern for the Army is, quite honestly, the Army brand is a small segment of this problem, right? So if you look at the Army, it's significant, because if the Army brand, if we don't, and when I put this uniform on, I have U.S. Army on it. If that brand isn't solid and trustworthy, our recruiting is impacted, our ability to affect the adversaries on the, as far as deterrence and partnership activities is going to be degraded over time. So that's why we're working really closely with the Office of the Chief of Public Affairs and some other entities out there to try to figure out how we help the Army just on that problem set, and using that as a bit of a use case of how we expand that out for other efforts, right? Because again, public affairs represent the commanders. This is a commander-centric activity, and so that's been kind of one of those focal areas that this effort's been kind of gravitating towards. If that, I don't know if that helps. Brian, you want to expand on that?
I just say, you know, I think the Army struggles with determining, do we have an advantage, period, an operational advantage. Look at Afghanistan, case in point. So determining if we have an information advantage is also going to be extremely challenging. I think we have to focus as this group on at least determining what the MOPs and MOEs are. We got to develop that. We got to get the framework. Once we have the framework, then it's a commander's objective assessment using MOPs and MOEs to determine, do we have an advantage now? Are we trending in the right direction? Are we doing the right things, and are we doing them well? But I think we really need to focus on MOPs and MOEs right now as a start point, determining if we have information advantage. You know, again, it's a decision dominance is a desired end state or a desired state. You know, we're always going to be driving toward that. I don't know if we'll ever clearly measure it well.
And so what we're offering with the conceptual framework is a way to start kind of figuring that out a little bit, because when you use the 5 core tasks across the bottom, you start being able to say, here's some segments, knowing that they're going to be complementary to each other, but then you can start saying, I'm winning. I need to pull more levers in this area. I know that I'm falling behind maybe from my appreciation of the battle space as the commander. And so I got to accelerate some activities in that area. So you can focus the staff, you can focus capability then, that hopefully will get that kind of outcome so that you can be purpose driven. Now what I don't have up here is I don't have objectives, because I don't have the end state or the purpose for the task. I just have the activity that we're going to do, because it's up to the commanders to understand that operational environment and then figure out and determine what they want to do as far as what they have to achieve for the particular situation that they have at their echelon, right? So again, trying to scope this across the echelons has been part of the challenge to how to describe that, and that's why we've been focused on the commander aspect of this that you heard this morning. So what other questions we have? Hopefully that answered them.
Okay, so my name's Torrey Carlisle. I work in the Requirements Integration Division within Cyber Center of Excellence. Been coordinating with the APOIA here. To give a little more context, perhaps might be helpful for you. So information advantage includes a broad range of occupational specialties, public affairs, civil affairs, cyber, electronic warfare, information operations. The idea of the integration, the regular integration of those efforts, and this information advantage integrated into the FIRES process, the targeting process, regularly, okay, integrating like the GOs talked this morning, for leaders at all echelons to understand this is a regular recurring theme, just like OPSEC was everybody's responsibility to understand. That will help us achieve, and it's not necessarily thought of as a persistent information advantage or persistent decision dominance, but opportunities. Just like when you're fighting, you know, you have opportunities where you have a momentary advantage. That is more realistically the application that we recognize. So it's a matter of wargaming, to be able to understand how technology, right, how technology can feed the data we need in a timely manner to give us those 3 Vs, like General Stanton talked about, to be able to achieve success and to support the maneuver of our commander. Any other questions on me relative to this? Or this is really, that's the context for information advantage and the application of that for the Army and across the joint community, coalition community.
So one thing to consider is that this is a set of conditions. Like we're trying to set and articulate in those terms, which we haven't done necessarily with the information and operations aspect. Because a lot of times that would gravitate into, I have a capability, hey IO guy, I need you to go get me some more EW, or I need some more of that, more PSYOP, right? This is now trying to articulate, this is what I need for change in the environment. So there's a shift mentally that we're trying to achieve with this effort, and the opportunities with this effort. That's what General Stanton was talking about this morning in the big room about the science, then producing and contributing to the art aspect of this for the commander, right? Does that make sense? So what other questions do you have? Yep, go ahead.
Sir, Kevin Stark, Army Cyber Institute. I appreciate your comments on the domestic population and the fact that there's one information environment. At least two of the core tasks pretty significantly intersect with the domestic population and involve entities that are not the Army or DoD that own or operate parts of that information environment. And then trying to think about how our role in that, we run into pretty significant legal and policy limitations. I'd be curious on your thoughts on how you're thinking about that, those limitations, and how we're potentially informing other political or legal reforms that might shape how we operate in this information environment. Thanks.
So that's where really Army Futures Command is engaged right now. So as we look at the concept for this, for the joint community, they're working through some of the eaches of what those, what the context does and what that means for those different areas of the legal issue and the policy issues of this right now. So that's where a lot of the learning is still occurring on this. So everybody recognizes that this is in support of the joint commander, and then it goes to the next level though, right? It goes to what is the support to the interagency. So as you see what the military support right now is to the embassy in Afghanistan, for instance, right? And what does that mean for projecting and on their behalf in some certain areas that they don't have access to right now, is going to be part of the outcomes, hopefully, as we do the experimentation and the prototyping on this. Because if we don't bring the interagency together, we're going to not be successful. So when we look at the MIS and DIS XORG, we know that the FBI is going to be involved in some of those activities because they have the domestic space, right? And that's why we're leaning on the public affairs folks, because they educate and inform domestic audiences for the most part. Even though we recognize that they also have, when they're doing that, it's also being projected in the foreign and international spaces out there. So same with the interagency. So as the Army does things, it can't do anything alone, and we all recognize that in the construct. And that's why the team aspect of this has been pretty incredible, honestly. And the cooperation that we're getting across the board has been good. It's just that there's just not enough time in the day. So this is an effort right now to really start a little bit of the forest fire a little bit, right? So if this can spark off with just your all's attention and interest this morning and get the word out a little bit so that hopefully we can get this thing really rolling for the Army. So that's why we're here. Did that answer your question? We need to do more faster, which this thing is about, right? Be more effective and faster on it. And bringing the partners is part of that. So we've been working with some folks at the National Security Council and some other folks that I know, just from a personal level, to try to help get at that a little bit. Any other questions? That's it? Go ahead.
So, not really a question, kind of a statement. So, the interesting thing of what Mike's talking about here is it's something new, so 10, 15 years ago and such, in Iraq and Afghanistan, we started this whole concept. It never became really doctrine, effects-based operations. So what is effects-based operations? Part of what we did with synchronization and effects-based operations was bringing in public affairs, bringing in civil affairs, bringing in PSYOPs, MISO, bringing in the IO team, bringing in the fires team, bringing in the dog teams that we had. All these different force multipliers or all these different elements that went out there and made some type of effect on the battlefield. Now we're calling it information advantage, but it's nothing different that we've been doing for 10, 15 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's just understanding how to synchronize that. Who is the synchronizer? So, we're talking about who's going to be the lead for the actual writing of the doctrine for the Army on these. Who has proponency on all these different elements. So we're talking about 7 different agencies or organizations that have proponency on everything from civil affairs to public affairs to all to IO to cyber and EW. Synchronizing those is key, and that's really what we're trying to get at here, I think, is in order to achieve information advantage, how do you synchronize that on the battlefield? How do you synchronize that in the operational environment? And then taking those dimensions, the information dimension, the human dimension, how do you use those different dimensions to synchronize in the operational environment? Just kind of my take on it. Just want to understand everyone knows this is not new. It's just we're finally putting it down and putting a word on it, information advantage, and we just need to move forward and just take control of it, I guess.
So I'm gonna give you a counter perspective on it, just because I've been doing this for a long time. And just, I was a civil affairs officer for a while. I started as an artillery officer, then did civil affairs, then did IO, and then I was the Cyber Protection Brigade. I replaced General Stanton. So I've kind of been around, and when you say information relay capabilities, I've covered most of them, if you will, right? So this to me is different than information operations at this point. That's why we still have the information operations proponent, because we need people to be able to do that integration. What this is it's informing the commanders now that they have a higher responsibility in this space of information to understand it and create and maintain conditions of advantage in the battle space. And it's relative to an adversary. That's the big change of this, is that as partner from the MI community brings up, this is now brings really a focal point of I need to understand myself, but even more importantly, I have to understand the adversary at my echelon, in my operational environment, in a different level and scale than we really were considering in the previous iterations. Because you could kind of let the PSYOP guys kind of go do their PSYOP fight. You would let and when they were synchronized at some point, but kind of disparate capabilities off doing some things. So this is really about putting that ownership on the commander to understand and then focus that. And so when we started talking with some of the senior leaders about the synchronization aspect of this, and they brought up the fact is, well, this is what G3s have always had to do. They are the synchronizer for the commanders. So why do we need a 39 section, for instance? And they said, well, there's just too much. The span of control is too great for a 3, is some of the discussion that came up. And then they said, well, if the 3s can't do it, then we need different people to be the 3s. Okay, so this is going to drive change for the Army, and I'm not saying that 3s have been doing it wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that the Army is trying to reinvent itself right now a little bit, as they talked about an inflection point, to understand how to do the scale of and the scope of integration that's required now in the battle space at the speed of that it's required at. And that's why we're talking about, and General Stanton did, obviously in his fantastic way of getting everybody fired up, is that he articulated this morning is about that the data and that speed requirement is going to be really critical in the battlefield. We know that our adversaries are getting there. So when we talk about where do we find our advantage, it's going to be how we handle our primary weapon system, which is the network, quite honestly, because it's going to inform all the decisions made. And so when you start talking about the proliferation of sensors on the battlefield, that means more information. Now, with more sensors, more information, there's potential for more deception, quite honestly, on the battle space. Everybody thinks if I see more, I will understand more, but there isn't a direct correlation to what we're finding in the research. So a lot of this is working through those kind of problems and enabling a commander's success in the battle space. Does that make sense? So I would argue that this is different because of the focus is now shifted. Go ahead.
If I can add to that, General Rainey, the former TAC commander, said in February at the IA forum, we're merging the information environment into the operating environment. There are no two environments anymore. He said, commanders would outsource information stuff to the information environment people. That separated operations from information. The operators want to focus on killing. You've got to bring them together. This concept brings that together. There's one operating environment. That's a significant change. From a public affairs perspective, the way I like to articulate this is what I've seen in my career with commanders is they're very effects-based in their PA work. So, judging risk and things like that, if I don't shoot around, I can't kill a civilian, metaphorically speaking, with PA. I'm not going to do that interview because I might make a mistake and get us off track. That mentality doesn't work for information advantage because information advantage is information maneuver. outmaneuvering right now. They are messaging on Taiwan right now. We are being outmaneuvered right now in the information space with respect to Taiwan because of what's happening in Afghanistan. That's what we're talking about with information management, at least from a PA perspective.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was getting ready to ask that very question. I kind of understand, I understand the cyber piece, I understand the signal piece, I understand the IO piece, and the EW. And so from an information advantage standpoint, and I appreciate you for doing that because I was going to ask if you could elaborate on in information advantage, what is the PA piece, which you just did, appreciate that. But now my second question is, what is the CA piece to this as it fits into information advantage? What is the civil affairs piece as it relates to information advantage? Can someone also explain how that fits into the information advantage framework?
So let's go back to what civil affairs have done for a long time, right? So they do activities to do what for the commander? Do you know?
Host nation communications for the commander as it relates to how the commander sees their host nation allies, and not only that, but the enemy as well.
Right, so that's one of the reasons why Special Operations COE has this work plan. Inform and influence international audiences, right? So when you're going down range, and when I used to go, a lot of my time was spent at the embassy because I was trying to align what the ambassador was working in that country. And then when I was going and talking to the host nation, I wasn't having fratricide when I would go and work with our partners in that particular country. So a lot of this has to do with that coordination and synchronization too, because a lot of this is going to be focused on the purpose, because again, about setting conditions, yeah? So the civil affairs aspect is going to be really critical on that inform and influence, because there's going to be that translation of what our purpose and what the commander's intent happens to be with folks that are going to be looking at it from a different perspective. And having that expertise that can provide that perspective to our partners or our adversaries, quite honestly, and then back to the commander to give them an understanding so they can make proper decisions is going to be really critical in this process, just as much as the public affairs to understand the domestics and everything else that goes along with this effort.
So it's almost like you guys have to be literally parallel effort. If I can say, you know, left, right, brain as it relates to not only how I deal with allies and the story to the allied nation, but also, if I could say right brain, how the enemy is perceiving, but not only that, but how we deal with the host nation allies as well. That has to almost be a simultaneous effort. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would compare it to almost like combined arms maneuver, but think information. We each have our own authorities and permissions. PA has Title 10. All day long we can tell the truth. We're covered in law. That's why we kind of lead counter mis and disinformation. Sometimes we have permission issues when we get to the interagency process, but we have to be thinking, IA is kind of like combined arms maneuver for information folks, so it depends on, and that gets to the SUDA loop as well. When we're getting to the side portion, all those things have to be coming together to enhance each other.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, hey, Colonel Hammerstrom, thanks for the session. I am Mr. LaFlamme. I am the the concepts deputy for Colonel Koster. I just wanted to do a check on learning real quick. The logic chart that's up, my understanding is that's a doctrinal logic chart. And we had some great words from the folks from CAC here. People keep saying concept. Unless you're an Army Futures Command, there's a great deal of confusion between concepts of operations, concept of employment, logic maps and things. We're working on something to get after General McKean's objectives to get after things. Understand General Rainey just left and General Martin's there. But I just want to be clear for the audience, there's a great problem in my community where people will say concept. Ideas for the future are in the future. They are not in the present. So the RID team's doing a really great job doing their effort to get the personnel piece straight for the current force, but not the future force because we're not there. And so I would caveat on General Stanton's words where he says, we're working on something. This may be the language we use. We may use something different. So clarity is one of those things that we always seek. But just wanted to be clear for the audience, I can do the check on learning, sort of make sure that that logic map is a doctrinal framework, not a conceptual framework. And so when you use words, terms, and phrases that are at the bottom, it's more of a doctrinal employment of forces and not a conceptual, what we're going to do in 2035 or 2040 from a science and technology, from a force employment, from all those things. So just wanted to thank you for the opportunity, but I also wanted to make sure that I was clear on what that was, because people say concept, concept, concept. I haven't finished a concept on information advantage yet. So we just got to be sure what we're asking for, and we're asking for a lot of senior leader guidance during these sessions to make sure that our vector is correct. So we just finished publishing the cyberspace DW updated concept, like Colonel Coster said. We used a lot of words, terms, and phrases to leverage language for the future, to push things there. But I don't think that the determination at the joint staff level, much like General Morrison said, we kind of want to align the things in joint for the Army. We're getting there, and we're trying to assist our IA team here to get there. But I just wanted to be clear, so if somebody takes it away and snapshots it and puts it on social media and puts it out there, doing what our good West Point friend here said, you know, that it's couched in the correct terminology. So over to you, sir, but thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, so you'll hear me say this as an approach. That way I get away from the nuances of the particulars as he just described it. However, the IA white paper that was approved by the 3 stars did call this a conceptual framework. So I'm going to go with the 3 stars. So I just want to make sure I caveat that as well. So everything that I'm everything that I'm providing to you today was what was approved in that IA form in February.
No disagreement for me.
Okay.
And the IA white paper is an IA white paper.
Yep.
It is not a concept in a concept framework.
That's good.
So I just want to make sure we're clear.
So Dave, just to clarify, so what we've got here, there's a plain language English definition of the word concept and conceptual framework. This conceptual framework, Dave is correct, is being applied to doctrine. There is also an Army process definition of the word concept that applies to future concepts, which is what Mr. LaFlame talked about. So
Thanks, Aaron.
yeah. So
Aaron,
the Army process versus plain language.
We tag team the doctrine deputy and the concept secretary.
We have another question here.
All right, so this is where all the learning is happening right here, right? So just letting you know. No, I really appreciate both you gentlemen highlighting that and articulating it, because it is important. Because really what we're looking for is we're looking for some commonality in language so we can move the effort forward. Because if we can't communicate, there's just going to be continued confusion out there, and that's what we're trying to avoid with this. And why all the 3 stars came together, because there was confusion. They knew that they needed to get this effort moving, and the best way to do that is get them all in the room, and they all work through it. And this is the outcomes from it. So this is what I wanted to use this as an opportunity to then just inform you all and educate you as task number 3 there. That's why I brought my public affairs partners to this. To make sure that you all understand where this definition is coming from. So again, if we don't do that, then information advantage is going to take its own life of its own, and I've already seen that. Everything is being attached to, as cyber did, right? Everything was cyber all of a sudden. Information advantage is gravitating to that same kind of, it's going to be everything to everyone as long as it's applicable to their particular interests, right? So again, I'm trying to make sure that you all, at least that, while I can influence you all, can understand this, right? So go ahead. I'm ready.
How's it going, everybody? Charles Robinson. I'm an intelligence planner. So for us on the intelligence side, it's helpful to know who the units of action are and who we're supporting. And so, you know, these comments are good because if we're in the current state, we're talking about synchronization and we're talking about the 3s. Has there been any thought about these core tasks and who the actual units are? So as intelligence professionals, we can know who we need to provide information to.
So that what they framed during the conference is they're looking at these tasks as being core and above. So AFCEA and core is where they were predominantly focused for the forum, because they see the tactical fight as described today at that division level now. So do you do competition as a division commander? Maybe, but it's going to be fairly rare, right? Because again, their focus and mission sets are now going to be defined a little bit different on the battlefield. So again, I think that's where the focus is. So that's why we're really looking at how Army Cyber is working some of their task force efforts that they're experimenting with this last summer. And then how we're going to go into the new the JWA cycle for exercises and the campaign of learning for Futures Command this next summer. And we're kind of, because of all that stuff has to be planned so many years in advance, we're bringing this in and kind of strap hanging this on some of the, we're adding it on, I guess is the non-military term for that. We're adding this on to some of those exercises. So it's going to affect the planning a little bit. And then when we get into MOPs and MOEs, it's going to, we have to kind of shoehorn this thing into some of those exercises. Yeah, go ahead, Sean. Carm.
Good presentation, Mike. Former IO guy, I like what y'all have done here. One very important comment to make that I think might be helpful towards operationalizing the term. As you were saying, everyone's trying to hang on now to the information advantage term. The very important subtle difference here is it's a condition. It's an effect. It's the outcome of what you do. I don't think it's necessarily helpful to refer things as information advantage activities.
Right.
Because you're going to get dragged down this road. IO was all things, right? It was, what's my IO campaign? What's my mind trick? What's my winning hearts and minds, right? You want to be able to talk about it in discrete terms, so leave the term discrete. So the staff has to be able to say, we recommend an operational advantage at here, here, and here. We expect the enemy to do something similar at X, Y, and Z, and then the commander can come back and say, no, I need it at A and B. But really, just leave that term for what it is, the condition, the outcome. Try to avoid the other strap hangers, and the words will have more meaning, and you'll be able to get closer to speaking to the commander in those terms. Just
No, that's a great point. And actually, the work that we've been doing more recently, we've been moving away from, I've been trying to steer the ship away from those terms. But again, that was one of the definitions that was defined by the 3 stars in February, and it was included into the logic map on there. But I have been trying to pivot the ship away from that for that great point, quite honestly, right? And I see the discussions going down into the information advantage related capabilities discussion, right? And I'm like, this is not, and stop, right? Just stop. We're past that now. We want to focus on, again, that's why I said so many times in the script here, all military capabilities, and that's a huge paradigm for the commanders to break, quite honestly, of what they've been doing in the past, is that they're now supposed to embrace all of those things from the 3 stars perspective. And that means there's going to be education requirements. There's going to, even at the Army Senior Education Program level at Fort Leavenworth that they do with the GOs, it's going to be at that level all the way down that's going to have to be shifting the Army, quite honestly. So this is about really a bit of a cultural change, because we've been doing the IRC and the IO discussion for 20 years now. And quite honestly, that's where the seniors all sat together and said, this is why we don't think this is working. We need something different, and this is what the outcome of that discussion from them all were. Go ahead.
It's kind of like over time, we'll do a military deception operation for a tactical advantage on the ground. We got to change the thinking with commanders to incorporating information. So that sometimes we're doing operations for an information effect to affect a decision in the adversary. That's a bit different. We saw Al-Qaeda, Islamic State do operations for an information effect. Kobani is an example. So merging information environment, operations environment together, it's gonna take time. But we got to develop commanders who will incorporate all those things together, do operations sometimes for an information effect to affect that adversary's decision making.
And quite honestly, that may be the actual primary goal of the operation from now on. And that's going to be a huge shift of how we're doing this. So when we first looked at this, I asked the question, what's the difference between maneuver warfare and attrition warfare? And we were still talking about information warfare at one point. What do you call those in doctrine? Chuck, remember? Yeah, methods or approaches is what one of the phrases were. So if it's a method, I was trying to figure out if this was a new method, because of the focus is different. Like the focus was on attrition, and the next one is focused on maneuver. Now is this a focus in a different area? And so we've been back and forth in the debates, and this is where we're still aligning right now, is that this is an approach that's going to be incorporated within these other the concepts as we described them. So, but I'm keeping you all, it's after 11 o'clock. I know you guys have a lot of other sessions to go to. I understand I have the room until 2 o'clock, so I'm just going to stay in here and mingle. So if you guys want to just continue the discussion, you're more than free to stay in here if you want to continue to kind of ask some questions and debate this. But please don't let me hold you if you have other places to go. All right, thanks, y'all.